Welcome to the Water Resources Podcast. I'm your host, Bridget Scanlon, from the Bureau of Economic Geology at the University of Texas at Austin. This podcast is produced in partnership with the National Academy of Engineering. In this podcast, we discuss water challenges with leading experts. Today, I would like to welcome Francois Bertone and Lucy Lytton, who are senior groundwater specialists in the World Bank, to the Water Resources podcast. Thank you both for joining me today to talk about groundwater issues in the World Bank. And you recently released a report titled The Hidden Wealth of Nations, the Economics of Groundwater in Times of Climate Change. And I was very impressed with this report, and I hope today we will be able to discuss various aspects from the report and other issues that the World Bank is dealing with in terms of groundwater. So the title of the report, The Hidden Wealth of Nations, sort of follows on from what the UN talked about last year, groundwater making the invisible visible. And so I think that's the challenge. Many people don't understand the groundwater, and it's connected to so many aspects of what you're dealing with at the bank. Poverty alleviation, food production and irrigation, and drought resilience and health impacts. And so today we will try to cover many of these aspects and then talk about how to govern the governance issues in terms of groundwater. So maybe we'll start with Francois. Maybe you can describe a little bit about what were the drivers in developing this report by the World Bank.
Well, thank you very much, Bridget. Well, the drivers is always difficult to know what are the main drivers. Yeah, the World Bank is working on ending with poverty, and we are tackling many aspects on the poverty side, and on the water sector. Groundwater is one of these aspects that we are not yet focusing much on. And I will let Lucy continue on that because she worked on groundwater quality, and she published last year a very interesting report on global groundwater quality and how to tackle these issues. And probably we can understand that the economics of groundwater, which is the main topic of this report, comes just after that, and because it's definitely the next stage on how to bring the groundwater topic at the highest level to the decision makers. But maybe Lucy will add more on
that. Yes, so I was so my observation of working in the bank is that the presence of groundwater in project areas is often seen as the kind of the silver bullet, the one thing that will save a population from ruin. And the problem with that image is that the complexities of groundwater management are not well understood, and it's the unique storage characteristics that give it the capacity to buffer, and only if that buffer is not overexploited in the long term. And so to manage that, it's the storage characteristics we need to understand, and so came that kind of characterization of the groundwater as presented in the report. Yeah, so that was the
right,
one of the drivers.
Right. And so there was a very nice infographic provided with the report that discusses the highlights of the report. Maybe one of you could describe those a little bit, its role in reducing poverty, protecting food security, and enhancing resilient growth. And Francois, you mentioned that one of the key goals of the bank is to eradicate extreme poverty and also enhance growth and development. So maybe you guys, one of you could describe the highlights of the report.
Yeah, this is the interesting things. We all know this. We all know how important is groundwater in general, and especially us, groundwater especially. We know that it helps for food security, it helps to reduce poverty, it helps for resilient growth. What is interesting with this report is now, for the first time, we bring figures. And for instance, we managed, the economists at the World Bank, they managed to identify that if only you have access to groundwater, individual farmers have access to groundwater, then this access help them to mitigate half of the losses in agricultural yield caused by droughts. Meaning that now we have a figure. You don't have access, you face 100% of your drought. If you have this access to groundwater, you manage to mitigate half of the impact on the agricultural yield. And globally, on the economics, you have access to groundwater, you manage to, you have a buffer on economic growth that cover about 1/3 of a drought event. Meaning that nowadays, we cannot say, groundwater help to reduce poverty. It's more than that. It's when you have access to groundwater, you gain 1/3 of economic development compared to when you don't have access in case of drought. And it goes even in details like with stunting, for instance. We know that stunting of the child under 5 usually affect or globally affect something like 23% of the population. And you move this percentage to less than 8% if only people have direct access to the groundwater resource. So this is what the infographics want to show. Really comes with exact figures that were obtained at the global scale. Obviously, there are differences by regions and there are all these details. But what is important is nowadays, when we come to talk to the decision makers, when we come to talk to at the political level, we can come with figures. It's not about, groundwater is very important, it helps. No, it's groundwater helps to save 1/3 of the economic losses in case of drought. This is a very important figure that now shall help the decision maker to take the political action that will maintain the groundwater. Because what is also in the report is that as soon as you are facing groundwater depletion at some place, all this economic gain, you lose it. It disappears. And this is also a very interesting result of the report. You lose your economic gain or your buffer capacity or your resilience capacity that is gained with the groundwater. You lose it as soon as you are in an area where we record groundwater depletion.
Lucy, would you like to add anything to that? You're muted.
You're muted.
Sorry, I think Francois explained it very well. That's that nice diagram.
Right. And so I think it's great to have the numbers and the infographic, you indicate that 49% of domestic water usage relies on groundwater. 43% of water used for irrigation is based on groundwater. And so, as you mentioned, Francois, it avoids the 50% loss of yield that you would encounter from drought if you didn't have access to groundwater. And then the linkage to health impacts with stunting in children, reducing that from 23 to 8%. So access to shallow groundwater is extremely important in global growth. Maybe it's my background. I traditionally think of the World Bank as funding large-scale projects, irrigation and dams and things like that. But I mean, it seems like switching then to an emphasis on groundwater is a big change the World Bank. I know you see still funding work related to dams to make sure that they continue functioning, but not expanding dam development. Maybe one of you could describe that a little bit and how that has changed over time.
Yes, if I could start here. So the bank has in fact financed groundwater projects for decades. However, the groundwater has often been a component of a project, and the activities haven't been separately tagged, and therefore they've had less visibility than, you know, the projects that involve constructing large and obvious infrastructure. So because groundwater is not only a hidden resource, but its infrastructure is also hidden, and its use in projects across many different sectors is often unseen. It's hard to put a large plaque on a borehole, and a ribbon cutting ceremony seems a bit out of place for buried infrastructure. But there are, I think the groundwater management improvement project in India, the Atal Bhujal Yojana project, that's now I think that's has a value of $420 million, and that is I think the first groundwater only project that the bank has undertaken. The green revolution in Asia, you know, relied on groundwater as it provided a low-cost source of water to the poorest tenant farmers that enabled them to grow marketable crops. And groundwater use across South Asia, in large alluvial basins and in local aquifers, has shown its value in supporting the most disadvantaged communities. So I think all of this, and there was a big technical analysis that backed up the groundwater project in India, and I think it's that's an important element of bringing projects like that to a funding source, because of the complexity of groundwater really requires a lot of technical work that is perhaps unfamiliar to traditional funders. And so and that's one of the great values of this report, The Hidden Wealth of Nations, I think, is that it couches some of the technical language in terms that are more readily understandable for people who are going to be responsible for signing the checks.
Well, I mean, the bank includes a lot of economists, so you have to first get it through that filter. So I think that helps you write something that should be more understandable to the general public and other funding sources too. So that's actually a plus. Even if it's a challenge internally, it helps you in the long term and make things more understandable. And one of the aspects of the report that I really appreciated was the description of aquifer typologies and helping us understand how these aquifers work. And you explain it in very simple terms, and the graphics that go with it, you know, a bathtub for large, deep aquifers like the Nubian sandstone, and then egg cartons for the small aquifers and the basement rocks, and how we need to understand how these aquifers work if we're going to manage them appropriately to deal with climate extremes, climate change, and food production. Maybe one of you could describe the aquifer typologies and how that concept evolved and how you came up with these 4 types, because many others in the past have different, slightly different types of aquifers, and YMAP and other groups have developed global aquifer maps. Which one of you would like to take that one on?
Maybe Lucy, you start, and
I'll start. I think Francois will embellish or elaborate. So yeah, we classified the aquifers into 4 different types. Major alluvial aquifers such as the Indo-Gangetic plains, which are like bathtubs in that they have large storage and are slow to deplete. Shallow aquifers such as most of Peninsular India and much of the African continent, which are like as you said, like egg cartons, in that they have limited storage and deplete and recharge quickly. And incidentally, that bathtub egg carton, I think we credited who the original idea. I can't remember who it comes from originally, but it was presented by another author earlier. Enkarstic aquifers, which are most similar to complex pipe networks, and complex aquifers that tend to be deeper and or interlayered. And our intention, as I kind of mentioned earlier, was to provide our readers with mental images of key aquifer attributes that would help them understand why decisions on groundwater management need to be adapted to the aquifer type. So it's not just, oh, here's groundwater, this is how you manage it. You have to adapt it. And the challenge of developing this classification was the availability of global data sets. And perhaps Francois can kind of elaborate more on this aspect.
Yeah, yeah, well, okay. Typology, if we want to have a global analysis, and this was the request from the economists, a global analysis. What can we say globally on the aquifers? And you mentioned, Bridget, you mentioned YMAP, which is the basics for the thing. But when we look at the typology in YMAP, very interesting typology, but it is oriented to the groundwater resource management, to us, for groundwater specialists. Here, the question that was asked by the economists was about accessibility. Is it accessible to individuals? Is it accessible to the poorest? Shall we rely on the institution to get the groundwater resource? Is it available everywhere, only locally? So the case of Karst, for instance, deep or not deep, accessible to, do you need to be a middle income country to access the groundwater? So this is why we had to adjust this. We cannot only work with YMAP. We had to adjust the typology to be able to answer to the economic questions. And the global data set, so YMAP, it's global, but then how to make it. And we find a way. We worked with the GLIMS, the global lithology database. It's not perfect. It's GLIMS #1, version 1. We are discussing with GLIMS author about updating these GLIMS, because it's important that we have it updated. We bring some local corrections to this original GLIMS based on other data sets. The big missing thing is about these major alluvial aquifers. We know that this back tube, we know the way it works is very different from any other, and you have the need for a collective management of this groundwater resource, and you cannot tell the people stop pumping somewhere, because this person will never see the change in his water level until the other users globally consider the thing. So it's very important that we have this major alluvial deposits or major alluvial aquifers well identified. It's still not perfect in our data set. It's still something that probably we need to bring the limits of the major alluvial aquifers from the specialists that can contribute to update it. But as Lucy was mentioning, the main question is, what is our global data set? What can we say today? And the answer cannot be, oh, we don't have anything good, or it's still very preliminary. The answer cannot be that. We need to continue. It's not perfect. It's far from being perfect. And on the scientific side, it's, well, okay, it's questionable. But it can be improved. It will be improved, and we hope that after us, some other will come, and will improve. What is interesting is not the data set itself, is the typology. The typology is really a first step to help the economists to tell us something about the accessibility of the groundwater and how groundwater impact economic growth. So this is very positive in the report. Less positive is the quality of the data set. Okay, wow.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think the conceptual understanding of how these aquifers work is very important for managing them appropriately. And I really appreciated how the report covered the range. And you emphasize quite a bit in the report the underutilization of groundwater in much of sub-Saharan Africa, and that much of this region is shallow aquifers over basement, regolith type aquifers, and that are readily accessible and that are sort of self-regulating because there's not that much to deplete. And they recharge, so they're more dynamic, and so people can manage them. And so maybe you don't need institutional control then to govern these types of aquifers. Maybe communities can learn to manage and work within what they can provide. But then on the other hand, then you have these large, like bathtub type aquifers, like the Nubian sandstone or the Indo-Gangetic plain, that really need to be managed because they're huge aquifers, they're a huge resource, and you need the whole community to come on board and to have an overarching governance approach. Maybe you can describe a little bit about the challenges. So, and then we've been seeing depletion in some of those large aquifers in North Africa, in India and other regions. And other people like Jude Cobbing has said, we really need to increase use of groundwater in sub-Saharan Africa to help with poverty and food production and things like that. Maybe you can describe a little bit about how those discussions evolved during the preparation of the report.
Sure. Just one point. Nubian sandstone is part of the complex aquifers. Let's come back to the typology. Typology is major alluvial. It can be accessed by individuals. And Nubian sandstone is only an institution that is able to drill as deep as necessary for this thing. So it's really the difference is there is in terms of access. It's not the size of the basin, but it's in terms of accessibility to individuals and especially to individual farmers. And then we can come, because it's directly linked to the Sub-Saharan Africa, and 62% of Sub-Saharan Africa is covered by basement aquifers. So what we call shallow aquifer, because of, as you said, Bridget, because it's local. You can deplete the aquifer, but you cannot have a long-term depletion. Every flood event, every rain event will fill the aquifer back, and probably up to the very maximum. So every year you have to you can again come back. And as you say, in terms of management, it can be local. This is the interest of the shallow local aquifer. The management can be local, and obviously you can overexploit because you might have a groundwater dependent ecosystem downstream of this shallow local aquifer. Nevertheless, if you overexploit, you can come back to the original situation. Well, unless you can also lose your groundwater dependent ecosystem, but in terms of water level, you can come back to the original level. So it's about how do you manage this resource to fill the gap between the two rainfall events, or the next time it will be repeated. And then we come to the resilience aspect of this groundwater resource. Groundwater resource, it helps you to cope with drought, and it helps you to maintain your agricultural yield. Meaning that if we want to tackle the food security in Sub-Saharan Africa, there is no option. We have to develop a shallow local aquifer in Sub-Saharan Africa. covering 62% of this resource. So it's just a matter of, there is a groundwater resource. We know that technically it's not easy. It's low yield. It's very shallow or very limited thickness of saturated aquifer and so on. We know that there are many technical issues, but on the other side, the groundwater resource is there. No other option if we want to cope with food security. So this should bring us to, now that we made the demonstration to economics, to economic specialists and to politicians and to decision makers. Now, next step, what do we do with that? How do we use the resource or organize ourselves to use this resource? And I will let Lucy continue on the overexploitation and because there is definitely this dichotomy. And the report highlights the three aspects: underuse, and typically the case for the shallow local aquifer in sub-Saharan Africa. Moderate use, and we didn't discuss about it, but it will come when we talk about quality, because moderate use does not mean preservation or fair preservation. And when we look at most of the aquifers in Latin America, we don't have overexploitation, but we might have quality degradation, very importantly. And the third part is overuse, and maybe Lucy, she will tell you about and specifically these examples in the endogenic, but we have the same in Northern Africa.
Yeah, so just basically in the Indo-Gangetic plains, so obviously there's documented overuse over large regions of the Indo-Gangetic plains, but also in peninsular India, where there are these local shallow aquifers, there has been hardship due to overuse of those aquifers, and that's where I think community sort of management of groundwater has shown to deliver the most results, really, because you can, by communities getting together and actually planning their crops, there's a lot of activity in this area of community management, both in bank funded project, the ABHY project I mentioned before, and also in other NGOs that are working quite a lot in peninsular India on this community management of groundwater, by basically enabling people, communities, to understand what their resource is, what their water level is doing at the beginning of at the end of the recharge season, at the beginning of the cropping season, and to plan accordingly what they will plant, what water is available. And I think that's and India, of course, has this very strong culture of community participation and community management. So it's a great place to demonstrate that these kind of techniques will work.
And in the Indo-Gangetic plain, then you've had overexploitation of groundwater, and I guess that impacts access to groundwater, because with the water levels dropping a lot, then the poorer people cannot drill wells that are deep enough to access the groundwater. And also there are water quality issues associated with that. I think that you've been working on, Lucy, geogenic contamination and other types of contamination. Maybe you can describe that a little bit.
Yeah, so the geogenic contamination, it's interesting. So the geogenic contamination, as you know, it's naturally present in some of the rocks and sediments which form aquifers that host groundwater. I mean, the most well-known of these is arsenic, that came to light in Bangladesh in the 80s, when a major switch from surface water to groundwater as a source of drinking water saved millions from an early death from waterborne diseases, only to condemn them to the toxic effect of prolonged exposure to arsenic, which is naturally present. in the groundwater. And, you know, arsenic's now known to be present in aquifers on every continent. Fluoride is another common geogenic contaminant of global extent and known to affect groundwater in many Asian and African countries. Manganese is commonly found in groundwaters around the world, and as is increasingly recognized for its harmful effects. And uranium is another one contaminant with known toxicity. And I'm not talking about radioactive uranium. I'm just talking about, you know, your ordinary bog standard uranium. It's more common than previously imagined. And I think what we're finding now is that many of these some of the way that we interact with our groundwater systems actually exacerbates some of these water quality issues. For instance, you know, the application of nitrates, fertilizers are thought to basically provide change the sort of redox conditions of the aquifer, which then enables some other contaminants to mobilize more readily. I think this is a fairly you know, it's groundwater quality studies are expensive to conduct. I mean, they require sort of a really lot of very detailed work, and these issues are often can be quite local because it depends very much, you know how variable an alluvial aquifer is. So it's very interfingered with sediments, with different amounts of clay and different amounts of source material. And the history of the Indo-Gangetic, the sedimentary history of the Indo-Gangetic plains is fascinating. It actually reflects the different changes of the different contributions of different parts of the mountain range according to where the you know, water levels were, where the mountain levels were. So it's actually kind of a massive reflection of both climate and orogenic actions in the earth over the last, you know, millennia. But, you know, notwithstanding, and salinity is sort of also a common geogenic contaminant, especially for older groundwaters. But there are many other causes of salinity, particularly, you know, that arise from how we use land and water. And really, I mean, in terms of the impact of water quality on increasing water scarcity, is actually the human impacts that is of most concern, particularly if groundwater becomes contaminated, because of the extreme difficulty of cleaning up an aquifer within a meaningful time frame, and therefore the long duration for which the groundwater is not safe to consume. And also in the countries where we're most active, laboratory capacity is often not up to the task of measuring the substances that are known to be toxic at very low concentrations, such as PFAS and many others. And that adds an enormous cost burden to any investigative work or cleanup project, which basically puts it pretty much into the prohibitive category. So the ghastly reality then is that groundwater is being consumed without a full knowledge of the quality impacts. And I mean, that kind of happened in Bangladesh in the 80s with the arsenic, you know. So, and I kind of fear that scenario could play out many times with other things that are much more challenging to measure. And the critical issue for water quality is it's a local issue. We need to measure it and then to manage land and water in a way that minimizes the harm of natural contaminants and avoids adding new ones, such as from fertilizer, industrial products, and domestic effluent.
Right. It's as if we didn't have enough to deal with water quantity scarcity. We also have to really consider water quality issues. And I like how you described it. I mean, I know some of the early work on arsenic was done by the British Geological Survey, said arsenic is generally ubiquitous in the sediments, but then whether it's mobilized or not depends on how we use these aquifers. And I think people have been doing a lot of research to figure out, you know, if we use the shallow aquifer for irrigation, maybe limit deep aquifers in Bangladesh for municipal use, and then try to avoid drawing down the good quality water into the deeper and maintain good quality water in the deeper aquifers without drawing down the contamination. So there are a lot of approaches then to try to manage water quality. And we had Paul Bowman talking a while back on African issues and fluoride and sclerofluorosis and trying to avoid the volcanics. Every time he does work on wells and stuff like that, he takes water quality samples, analyzes them, and tries to expand the database on groundwater quality. So if we look at, the World Bank funds a lot of different projects, and I'm not sure if I saw this correctly. I saw something like funds about $100 billion in active projects in 2021. And who exactly, I think, Francois, you tried to explain to me earlier that your client is the countries, and you're working with the ministries of finance in different countries, and how much of this funding is going towards groundwater. And Lucy, you mentioned earlier that groundwater can be a component of many different projects. So maybe one of you could describe that a little bit.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. Thank you, Bridget, for bringing this point, because it's very important for the people to understand what's the World Bank. And we all imagine the World Bank with plenty of money coming that can help our project in this university or this NGO or whatever. Now, the World Bank, we are lending money to the countries. That's all. So the money that is used for supporting project, it's the money of the countries, not the World Bank money. It's never the World Bank money. And it's always a country, a Minister of Finance, in association with his Ministry of Water, Water Resource, Environment, whatever, the minister in charge of the groundwater topic, that is spending this money in this direction or this order. So it should be very clear. I had yesterday another meeting with people looking for money to support groundwater research. We cannot, the World Bank is not, it's not our duty, it's not our role. Our role is to lend money to the Ministry of Finance to support either at the budget level or at the project level to support groundwater activity for the groundwater. What are we spending on the groundwater topics? This is we up to now we are blind. We don't know exactly. We don't have a groundwater tag. It's very recent that we have climate tag. We know exactly. We have gender tag. We know exactly what part of the project are considering this the gender topic appropriately. There are a series of corporate commitments, and we are tagging these commitments. On the groundwater, it's not a corporate commitment, and we don't have specific tag to understand, for instance, when we have a land conservation project somewhere that maintain the recharge to the aquifers or that enhance the recharge to aquifers, it could be partly a groundwater project. It's not tagged as such. So today, I'm not able to answer, nobody is able to answer to you about how much money the World Bank is dedicating to the groundwater topic. But this is the aim of the report. The aim of the report is to say, wow, whatever project, should it be agricultural project, energy project, it should look at the groundwater impact and groundwater implication. And this is part of the main result. When we know how important the maintaining the groundwater level can be on drought resilience, on poverty reduction, then you need to think all your project this way. Let's take, for instance, an energy project. climate free, more than climate free, climate oriented. We replace the diesel pump with solar pump. Wow, that's great. Excellent idea. Except that we know that the marginal cost is the cost of the last drop of water that we pump. The marginal cost of the pumping, the cost of the last drop is zero because of this solar energy is free. When it's installed, when it's running, the next drop is free. So then, by changing from a diesel pump to solar pump, we might increase the overexploitation of the aquifer because this water is free. So we need to change the way we are considering our project and the way we are designing the World Bank project to be sure that they are not necessarily pure groundwater project, but groundwater preservation oriented. We shall be sure that if we are working on agricultural project, the agricultural input that we are putting, this entrance that we are adding, this product, it can be nitrogen or whatever, are there to will not contaminate the groundwater resource. And same thing for any other agricultural project. Today there are subsidies to drilling. It's not direct subsidies to drilling. It's subsidies to wheat, for instance, and this is without taking into consideration the place we are developing this crop or the water source we are using. Probably in our project, in the World Bank, and not the World Bank only, every funders and even the national project, we need to be sure that we have this groundwater consideration and we don't promote the drilling or the extra drilling, extra pumping in areas that are already overexploited. So it's not easy to have a tank today.
Right. So I would like to highlight a couple of the projects that I came across in the Horn of Africa Groundwater for Resilience project, which is $385 million project that extends across Kenya, Ethiopia, and Somalia. I think that is designed, to help with the drought alleviation, and they had huge drought in this region over the past a couple of years. And then I also saw a reference to a project in West Bengal, 150 million to help about almost 1 billion people with minor irrigation. So I think maybe more and more we will see projects geared towards groundwater then in the future. Do you think that will be the trend?
And is it a need? The main question is, do we need to have pure groundwater project? For instance, groundwater for resilience in the Horn of Africa is more about how to use the groundwater resource to deal with drought and with food security in the borderlands. In this area where the state itself cannot go or can hardly go, which is very far with a high level of insecurity. So is it a pure groundwater project? Not at all. It's about using the groundwater resource for drinking water supply, for constructing pipe, and the $385 million is not $385 million of drilling. Obviously, most of this money is used to design and to construct pipe networks for these people to get the money. So it's called groundwater for resilience because the basics is there, is the resource in this borderland between Kenya, Ethiopia, Somalia, but it will include soon Djibouti, South Sudan. In this area, we know that the only resource is groundwater. So how to use it better, how to maintain it, as Lucy was saying, how to not to contaminate it, how to manage the the quality of the resource and the quantity and have access, are we going to see more groundwater? I don't think it's desirable. I don't think we need to have pure groundwater project. We need to have strong groundwater component or groundwater understanding in our project. In the energy project, we want the energy project when the energy minister of whatever country, Cambodia, will discuss with the World Bank, they will say, oh, we want to move from diesel to solar, but preserving our groundwater resource. Because we know that because of the groundwater depletion, the subsidence in the Mekong Delta is increasing. It's occurring naturally, but in addition, it increased, and we have a loss of 1.7 point of GDP every year because of this subsidence. So we want to maintain that, and we want our energy project to preserve the groundwater. That's the only objective of this report.
Right.
Just to say, groundwater is everywhere, much more present than what we think.
I think another aspect of the report and of other websites related to the World Bank is the role of groundwater and farmer-led irrigation development. I mean, Sub-Saharan Africa, you have, and South Asia, India, much of India, smallholder farmers with less than 10 hectares are the dominant number of farmers dealing with food production and food security. And so maybe you can describe a little bit about how groundwater helps with this. You've already mentioned, Francois, switching from diesel to solar, and I know some of your colleagues in Tanzania and stuff expanding solar energy sources to extract groundwater. So this decentralized approach and trying to help smallholder farmers, which of course is complicated by land tenure issues also, it's the whole thing. But I mean, helping these smallholder farmers, I think, is huge, and anything that you can do then to increase food security, double cropping, dry season cropping, all of those sorts of things would be very beneficial. Maybe one of you could describe that a little bit.
I don't want to talk on the behalf of my irrigation colleagues who are pushing for the farmer-led irrigation development. We know that there is an analysis these days at the World Bank, and the World Bank is really promoting the farmer-led irrigation development. So this is on one side. I don't enter into that. But when we are asked, what is the water source and especially in all this arid area for farmer-led irrigation, the only answer is groundwater resource. Here we can have it. You know, in Sub-Saharan Africa, most of the farmer land, the plot itself, are less than half an hectare. People are dealing with from less of half an hectare to up to 1 or 2 hectares and no more. So we don't have many options there for identifying and producing a groundwater resource at this place. So probably we have to work on the technology side to access to this shallow groundwater resource. We need to improve the way we are doing it. In some countries, in some area, and Lucy was mentioning it in the part of the Indian Peninsula, there is the development of the shallow groundwater there. In Sub-Saharan Africa, it's not developed, and when we compare the two, we see that the price of the wells, the open wells, is triple. We have it for less than $100 per meter in India, and it's over $300 per meter in Sub-Saharan Africa. Probably one of the main issues is there. Lucy also mentioned the variation, the overexploitation of this shallow groundwater, and the change in the amplitude of the variation of the water level. So meaning that we need to be able to dig deeper, to dig deeper in our open wells. How do we do it? How to introduce the jackhammer technology? How to introduce dewatering technology? So yeah, farmer-led irrigation is probably one of the solutions. Again, I don't want to talk on behalf of my irrigation colleagues. It's one of the solutions for dealing with food or tackling with the food security issue. Right. And access to shallow groundwater, yeah, it's not that easy, and especially if we want to make it at scale. At scale mean, and you mentioned that, Bridget, you say 62% of the sub-Saharan Africa is shallow
basement type aquifers,
shallow local aquifer, but it corresponds to 255 million of people. 200. So if we want to make it at scale, this food security things, it's irrigated land in this area. It's so many millions of wells, and it's a lot of work. Right. And we need to bring we need to help with the technology.
Right. So lastly, maybe we can talk a little bit about groundwater governance issues and the policy levers that you describe in the report, and how you can see things evolving in the future, and if you are optimistic about the role of groundwater in poverty alleviation, and how the bank can manage these issues.
Yeah, well, maybe a few things about the levers. Again, one of the main issue, and Lucy disconnected. She will come back. I hope so. But yes, here she is. Good. Because one of the, if we want to look at the levers to groundwater management, we need to separate definitely overexploitation, moderate use, and underuse. On the overexploitation side, we shall keep that in mind. We shall keep. It was part of one of your questions you had earlier about how does groundwater overexploitation impact the poorest. And yes, it's right. As soon as the water level goes down, it's only the poorest that cannot dig deeper. And the poorest in that case, they have to either sell the land and work for the new landowner who can dig the well and pump, or move to cities, migrate. And that brings us to the weak sustainability concept. Many economists were thinking that, yeah, why not over-exploiting the resource at a moment, if only it creates richness, it creates growth that allow to find the next step for development. And next step can be, I don't know, in the aeronautic industry or whatever. But economists, they demonstrate that it does not work for water. It might work for petroleum, for gold, for other resources, but not for water, because the overexploitation and the gross development is spread, probably because they are not economists, but probably because it's spread over a series of individuals that cannot really make the gap. So the conclusion of that is we cannot overexploit the groundwater resource. It's not a solution. It helps to tackle the food security, and that was the case in India. It really helps to work on the food security, but it does not reduce poverty. On the contrary, overexploitation increase the poverty, increase the sensibility to drought event, and especially in time of climate change, we'll see that it will increase. So what are the levers now on this case, on the overexploitation case? Work on the better groundwater management, preserve the quality. We know that we need to preserve the quality, and we need to really focus every single policy that to help preserving the groundwater resource. And we are not talking about groundwater law or groundwater policy. We are talking about every single policy. Energy, agriculture, that's the main one. We know that energy subsidies, we don't want the energy subsidies to impact, to contribute to groundwater overexploitation. We don't want the agricultural subsidies to contribute to that. Doesn't mean that we shall not subsidize agriculture. Yes, obviously we can continue to do it, but we need to do it with due consideration to the groundwater resource at this stage, and to look at the balance. Overexploitation is not the solution.
Yeah. So I guess we're coming towards the end of the hour, and I would like to maybe summarize, have you both summarize how you see things moving forward, and if you're optimistic about increasing role of groundwater and improved understanding that this report provides in helping us manage these aquifer systems and reducing poverty and helping with food security, climate smart agriculture, reducing drought, increasing drought resilience, and all of those different aspects. So maybe, Lucy, maybe start with you. What do you think looking forward? Are you optimistic about the future?
Yes, I am optimistic. I think for decades, technocrats like myself have been clamoring for better groundwater management, with perhaps not a lot of success to show for it. And the focus of the Hidden Wealth of Nations has been to set groundwater in its broader context and to translate technical information into management concepts that can be more readily understood by economists, by finance ministers, as ultimately these kind of individuals who approve investment projects across sectors. And champions in the economic world are very important allies for us. And groundwater has demonstrated to be instrumental in lifting populations out of poverty in South Asia. And the lessons of depletion across South Asia demonstrate the link between the aquifer type and the storage characteristics, which provide important guidance on how these can be used going forward and how we might adapt the use to the aquifer buffering capacity in times of climate change. And we would hope that, you know, academia might develop more global data sets which allow a more detailed integration of groundwater condition with other data sets and help us deliver a more comprehensive analysis going forward.
Thank you so much, Lucy. And Francois?
Maybe one more word on the next step, and that was highlighted when we launched this Economics of Groundwater report. We had the president of the International Association of Hydrogeologists and the former one. The two of them were insisting on the capacity, the national capacity for groundwater management, for highlighting these things. And I think they were perfectly correct. Yes, we shall be optimistic, and we shall not forget to prepare the next generation. These people that will locally be able to talk to the decision makers. And this is probably the gap that is missing in most of the developing countries. Most of the developing countries, people talking about groundwater are still coming from outside. They are not inside the country, sitting next to the decision makers. And this is definitely the next step. We are working on it, and we need to be optimistic. Yeah.
Well, thank you both for participating in the Water Resources podcast. Our guests today were Francois Bertone and Lucy Lytton from the World Bank, and I commend you on an excellent report and helping people understand groundwater and its role in poverty alleviation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget.